Welcome back, everybody, to another one-on-one hangout session in the treehouse. Today, we have a special guest, Kayla Rainey, with us today. Kayla, do you want to tell people who you are? Introduce
Hey,
yourself a little.
yeah. So I'm Kayla Rainey from Rainy Days Art. I am a freelance comic artist full time, and I work exclusively in the indie publishing industry, mostly with authors. So I also cover traditionally publishing novelists, not just comics. I also work in animation and with musicians.
Very cool. And the topic I really wanted to talk about today is how artists can avoid burnout. And the reason I
Yeah,
bring this up in particular with you is because you, I think, just took a hiatus off social media and maybe art. I'm not entirely sure,
yeah.
because you were burned out. And I just, what's your advice to give to somebody to avoid burnout? And can you maybe just explain your backstory of what led to that point?
Yeah. So I'm somebody, and I think this is really true amongst visual creatives, or, creatives across the board. I have a tendency to heap onto my plate more than I can really chew at one time, right? Like I get super excited and I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. And then 3 months into it, I'm like, oh, I wasn't ready for this. And especially with like the way that people are consuming media these days, particularly on social media, there's this instant gratification quality to artwork, right? That
Right.
didn't used to be there. Um, I started as a gallery painter and I was traditionally trained as an oil painter. And at that point in time in the early 2000s, this wasn't really much of a thing. So when the demand to produce a lot of content really quickly became just a normal part of being a relevant creator in the society, I think it created this pressure that we don't really quite understand how to deal with yet. So I was like, you know what? It may not be the best business decision, but I'm going to take time away from social media and really focus back on just the art making and what it means to practice as an artist who's not hindered by the demands of social media and that constant need for attention and validation through those platforms.
That's great. Do you feel like it helped? How long was this hiatus of yours?
So it was only supposed to be a month,
Okay.
and I ended up taking off a full 2 months because I got to the end of my month and I realized that I was only starting to crack the surface of like what was really going on inside that was continuing the cycle of burnout. So I went ahead and I took another month, and it was the best thing that I could have possibly done for myself. And I highly recommend to anyone, whether you think it's going to hurt your following, if you think it's going to disrupt your ability to get work or jobs. I entirely disagree. That was not my experience at all. I discovered that I had more of a loyal fan base and clientele than I could have ever imagined. And it was actually the most positive experience that I've had in probably the last 2 years.
That's great to hear. But also, I will say that it definitely isn't true because that's how I met you. I met you after your hiatus, and
Yeah.
it works. I was so drawn to your story, and I was like, oh man, and again, I saw the cool art. So definitely, definitely, if you need time off, I think you should take it. I think a
Yes.
lot of people, a lot of times, they put so much pressure on themselves,
Right.
and I think that's a lot of where it stems. Because self pressure, self permission, all these things
Yeah.
where it's always better to relax, take time for yourself, and make sure you're enjoying what you're doing and you can keep the momentum going for the long term. Because
Yes.
when you're thinking long term, you have to think, how do I get to that level? You have to think months in advance, years in advance, and
Yeah. Years for sure.
absolutely. The only way to do that is if you keep on track and avoid burnout. I think I've
Yeah.
had many friends who've been burned out in many different industries. I come from a business background, and then I know
Yeah.
I know people only last 1 or 2 years at their jobs before they leave for this very reason. So I would highly recommend everybody, listen to Kayla. Follow her new journey on social media. What can people
Yeah.
expect out of your new account after you come back? Um,
So, so something that I'm really trying to focus on is untangling myself from this idea of artists being brands. I'm really trying to invest more in the authenticity of just feeling free to give myself to be permission to be who I am on social media. And it may not appeal to my general demographic. It may be something that everyone is not on board for. It may not be the most aesthetic thing, but for me, it's the way that I feel communication comes most naturally. And I want that space to be a place that I can reflect what's happening with my clients, what's happening with my studio life, what am I thinking about, what is actually happening on internally, and sharing that.
And that's how you gain those true fans, because you know the
Yeah.
fans who stay around and stick with you, and even new fans that come aboard, that they really like you for who you are. You're not putting this aesthetic out there. And I agree, because not everybody's gonna like you, but the people who do, they're gonna really stick with you. And
Yeah.
I think it's super cool what you're doing. I think I think you should keep doing it. We'll keep supporting you. And yeah, do you want to say any last words, any last piece of advice for any struggling artists out there? It's your time to shine, Kayla.
Yeah, I think if there's anything that I could share, it would be to shift your perspective. It comes down to changing the frame that you're thinking in about how you approach social media. It's a tool for you to use, not for it to use you. Find validation through yourself and the things that are fulfilling you creatively, and not what social media is telling you is the right way to be doing it.